On a frigid day in mid-December 1944, Nazi troops broke through weak points in Allied defenses within Belgium's Ardennes region. American forces found themselves in chaos within 2 days. Whole units either encircled or scattered. The human cost would climb to roughly 90,000 U.S. troops killed, wounded, or captured. This engagement stands as the most devastating confrontation American forces faced during the entire Second World War. Yet 3 weeks before this catastrophe, a U.S. commander had positioned himself along the Rhine's banks. Across the water, Nazi fortifications sat vacant and unguarded. The route straight into the Third Reich lay completely exposed. This officer pleaded with Supreme Commander Eisenhower for authorization to advance. The answer came back negative. That officer's identity was Jacob Devers. The refusal he received might well have guaranteed the Ardennes disaster that followed. Jacob Devers existed outside the establishment's inner sanctum. He shared no history with Eisenhower or Bradley from their academy days or reunion gatherings. Their informal card sessions and planning meetings never included him. Yet George Marshall had taken notice of this capable officer. When Marshall assembled the military machine that would achieve victory in 1941, he handpicked just 4 generals for accelerated advancement. Devers made that exclusive list. His rise brought him among the youngest officers to wear 2 stars across the entire U.S. military. Marshall recognized qualities in Devers that escaped others: a leader who delivered outcomes without craving the spotlight. The Sherman tank emerged from Devers' efforts. The N-26 Pershing's development happened under his oversight. He championed the amphibious Stuka W vehicles that became crucial during the Normandy landings. While colleagues sought publicity, Devers focused on creating the hardware that would secure Allied triumph. Marshall's faith in Devers paid dividends by spring 1943. When Eisenhower transferred to North Africa, Devers assumed his position leading European theater operations. The replacement now matched Eisenhower's status, a reality Eisenhower wouldn't overlook. Mid-August 1944 arrived. As global attention remained fixed on Normandy's progress, Jacob Devers initiated an assault the world has largely forgotten. Operation Dragoon struck France's southern coastline with a force exceeding 150,000 soldiers. Devers controlled this entire undertaking. 12 U.S. divisions plus France's Worst Army, all under his 6th Army Group command. Nazi planners anticipated prolonged, brutal resistance along the Mediterranean coast. Reality proved quite different. Devers demolished their defenses. His troops penetrated inland at remarkable velocity. Marseille capitulated by late August. Germany's 19th Army crumbled during its northern retreat through the Rhone Valley. By mid-September, Devers had freed more French land than either Bradley's or Montgomery's forces. His casualties represented a tiny fraction of Normandy's toll. His logistics ran smoothly because he'd seized functioning harbors intact. The 6th Army Group stood as the most effective Allied command operating in France, yet American civilians barely knew it existed. November 1944 found the Allied push stalled nearly everywhere. Montgomery's northern forces bogged down in difficult terrain. Bradley's troops bled through the Hürtgen forest, absorbing 33,000 casualties for minuscule territorial gains. The broad front approach had ground to a standstill. In the south, however, Devers continued racking up victories. His units took Strasbourg on November 23rd, freeing Alsace's symbolic heart. French troops wept as their tricolor rose over territory Germany had controlled since 1940. More critically, Devers's advance elements had arrived at the Rhine itself. American reconnaissance teams crossed onto German territory and discovered something remarkable. The Siegfried Line's defensive positions stood empty. The fortifications intelligence reports claimed would demand thousands of casualties sat unmanned. The Germans had shifted their troops northward to confront Bradley and Montgomery. Germany's front door stood wide open. Devers simply required authorization to step through. Devers grasped the significance of what his forces had found. Should his troops cross the Rhine immediately in late November, they'd be operating inside Germany before year's end. They could pivot northward and assault the Siegfried Line from its vulnerable rear. They could isolate German forces opposing Bradley and Patton. The conflict might conclude within weeks. His intelligence staff confirmed the patrol findings. German opposition throughout his sector had evaporated. The 19th Army existed in fragments. Enemy reinforcements flowed north, not south. Devers transmitted urgent communications to Eisenhower's command center. His men stood ready. His supplies were adequate. His forces maintained their momentum. He possessed a clear path into enemy territory. All he required was a single word: proceed. He waited for radio contact. Hours passed. The Germans continued retreating. The opportunity remained available, and Devers found himself frozen by headquarters silence. Eventually, a response arrived, not permission to advance, but a summons to a conference, November 24, 1944, at Vittel's Heritage Hotel in France. Eisenhower arrived with Company Omar Bradley, and George Patton accompanied him. Devers entered that space confronting the theater's three most influential commanders. 3 West Point graduates, 3 establishment insiders. Devers represented the outsider. The gathering began formally, though doubt hung heavy in the atmosphere. Devers presented his circumstances. His forces held positions at the Rhine. Enemy defenses sat vacant. Reconnaissance had verified minimal opposition across the river. He requested permission to cross. Yet his argument faced more than geographical objections. He challenged an entire worldview. Bradley voiced concerns first. The Rhine's defenses posed excessive danger. Intelligence suggested substantial German strength. Any crossing attempt would be reckless and premature. Devers countered his patrols had confirmed those positions were abandoned. He possessed ground-level verification. The intelligence was flawed. The exchange intensified. Discussions extended past midnight into early morning. Eisenhower rendered his verdict: no Rhine crossing would occur. Devers must abandon all preparation for river operations. Instead, the 6th Army Group would redirect northward, supporting Patton's Saar Basin offensive. Devers reacted with shock. The war's defining opportunity lay before him, and he faced orders to abandon it. He contended that reinforcing success represented fundamental military thinking. His sector was advancing. Bradley's sector was hemorrhaging casualties. Why divert assets from what succeeded to salvage what failed? Eisenhower's response permitted no appeal. The broad front strategy demanded synchronized advances. Devers had outpaced the others. He would pause until companion armies caught up. Devers departed the Heritage Hotel into November's bitter cold. He recognized something had fractured during that conference. Not merely his offensive, but any illusion this war proceeded purely on tactical merit. He'd offered them triumph, and they'd issued him a halt order. That evening, his diary entries revealed his alienation. He sensed he didn't belong to their team. Devers' instinct proved accurate. He wasn't part of their team. Eisenhower and Bradley had studied together at West Point's class of 1915. Decades of relationship building, shared assignments, and mutual career protection bound them. Patton, graduating in 1909, had orbited their circle since peacetime. They maintained trust. They shielded one another's errors. They ensured mutual recognition and resources. Devers belonged to Patton's graduating class but never joined the network. He'd constructed his career on capability, not contacts. Marshall had elevated him. The West Point establishment had not. Officers serving under Eisenhower would later acknowledge what everyone knew then: Eisenhower actively disliked Devers. He would have removed him if possible. Only Marshall's backing preserved Devers' command. The directive came through. Devers would eliminate the Colmar Pocket rather than cross the Rhine. The Colmar Pocket represented a German bulge west of the Rhine in Alsace. Removing it would streamline Allied positions, a reasonable secondary objective, but not the Rhine. Devers redirected his forces away from Germany's undefended core. He initiated systematic operations against entrenched German positions and defender-friendly terrain. The momentum evaporated across Alsace's frozen landscape. His troops, who'd been racing toward victory, now received orders to sacrifice themselves for strategically meaningless ground. They'd exchanged a sprint toward glory for grinding attrition. And 200 miles northward, German commanders noticed something significant. Southern flank pressure had ceased. German intelligence monitored Allied movements obsessively. They'd observed Devers' advance with mounting alarm. Should Americans cross the Rhine southward, the entire Western Front would collapse. Reinforcements would require withdrawal from other areas to contain any breakthrough. Then the Americans halted. The anticipated Rhine crossing never materialized. Devers pivoted toward the Colmar Pocket. German commanders relaxed. Their southern flank threat was neutralized. More significantly, divisions earmarked for southern deployment could now serve elsewhere. Panzer units prepared for Rhine defense could be repositioned. Hitler had been developing a massive counteroffensive since September, an assault through the Ardennes to divide Allied armies and seize Antwerp. The operation demanded every available tank, every spare division, every soldier extractable from quiet zones. The American halt southward made that offensive feasible. December 16, 1944, 3 weeks post-Vittel Conference, 200,000 German troops struck through the Ardennes. They hammered the American line's weakest section with crushing force. The offensive achieved total surprise. American units resting in what they'd considered a peaceful sector suddenly faced panzer divisions. Some of those armored units had originally positioned to defend against a southern Rhine crossing that never occurred. The German scheme was bold, and thanks to the southern halt, they now possessed the manpower to execute it. Success nearly arrived. The Ardennes offensive became a frozen nightmare. American forces fought desperately, slowing the German penetration. The 101st Airborne, surrounded at Bastogne, refused surrender. Broken units regrouped and continued fighting. Individual soldiers held critical intersections against armored columns. Combat persisted 6 weeks. When it concluded, 19,000 Americans lay dead. Another 47,000 carried wounds. 23,000 were captured or missing. The casualty figures exceeded any other U.S. battle throughout the war. Every frozen fighting position, every family notification represented payment for a decision made in a comfortable Vittel Hotel. The real tragedy transcends the battle's occurrence. It's that the opportunity to prevent it had been readily available. Brigadier General Garrison Davidson, serving as 7th Army's chief engineer, witnessed Devers reaching the Rhine. He observed the vacant fortifications. He understood the opportunity's significance. Years afterward, Davidson documented his conclusion. Perhaps success would have eliminated any battle of the Bulge possibility. The 40,000 casualties there might have been prevented, shortening the war by several months. He wasn't theorizing, he was calculating. Had Devers crossed the Rhine in late November, German forces would have faced homeland invasion. Hitler couldn't launch his Ardennes offensive because those divisions would be needed defending German soil. The Bulge never happens. 19,000 Americans don't perish in the snow. The war concludes months earlier. Instead, the Rhine wasn't crossed until March 1945, 4 months after Devers stood prepared to accomplish it in November. The November 24th Vittel Conference appears nowhere in official histories. Eisenhower's memoir, Crusade in Europe, mentions only orders issued. It omits the meeting. It omits Devers arguing for crossing authorization. It omits the heated overnight debate. Bradley's memoirs ignore it completely. The sole documentation comes from Devers's personal diary and aid notes. Charles Whiting documented this omission in Death on a Distant Frontier, suggesting deliberate erasure. Why exclude a conference that shaped the war's trajectory? A commander who possessed opportunity to achieve early victory. A decision choosing caution over opportunity, a political calculation costing tens of thousands of lives. George Marshall never forgot Jacob Devers' accomplishments. On March 8, 1945, Marshall elevated Devers to 4-star rank. 4 days later, he promoted Bradley identically. The sequence carried intention. Marshall promoted Devers first, the man Eisenhower wanted dismissed. The outsider excluded from the team, the general who liberated more French territory than anyone, then watched his Rhine crossing cancelled for political motives. Marshall ensured history documented who merited recognition. Devers proceeded to capture Stuttgart, Nuremberg, Munich, and Berchtesgaden. His forces liberated Dachau. They seized Hitler's Eagle's Nest. Yet credit eluded him. Historical accounts emphasize Patton's aggression and Montgomery's deliberation. Devers remained the forgotten 4-star, the commander who nearly ended the war early, but was stopped by his own leadership. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't inevitable. Germany's door stood open, and the general capable of walking through it, potentially saving 19,000 countrymen, received orders to stand down.